Let's start off with Jorge Polanco. And here's how I'm going to lead Jorge Polanco. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just figured we should read the lines for all these guys so everybody has an idea of where they're at as we currently sit. So all I was going to give people before you dive all the way into it is for where we sit right now at time of recording, Jorge Polanco in 2024 has a 595 OPS, 5 home runs, a 79 WRC plus, and a negative 0.2 F WAR.
So I was struggling a way to say this while doing this preparation. I don't know how you can, when you just read that line right there and watching what Jorge Polanco has done this season, I don't know what way to say this besides saying this looks a whole lot like what we saw from Colton Wong last year. A whole lot like what we saw from Colton Wong last year. And mind you, Jorge Polanco over the course of his career has been a significantly better hitter than Colton Wong was in his career. Colton Wong, for much of his career, was a below-average hitter who ran the bases well and played good defense. Had a couple of good offensive seasons. Jorge Polanco, for his career, has been a well above average hitter. But if you look at what Jorge Polanco has done this season, the resemblance is unbelievable. It is way more like than any you or I or anyone would be comfortable looking at 2 months into the season.
All I can say is, what happened to this guy? Seriously, what happened? Since 2018, he had never had a WRC plus in a full season below 111. Below 111. In 2020, he struggled. But again, I throw that year out the window for every single guy that struggled because there was just too many outside factors that really made it difficult for a lot of guys to have truly good years, especially when you start in late July. It was nearly impossible for a bunch of guys. So I throw that out. The full seasons that Jorge Polanco's had since 2018, he's never been below 111. And the last 3 years, he was at 124 in 2021, 119 in 22, and 118 in 23. What in the world has happened that everything has just all of a sudden taken a nosedive for him? We're going to dive into it, but even diving into it, I'm still just baffled by it all.
He shouldn't at age 30 fall off a cliff. Colton Wong has had a few years on him last year when he fell off the cliff. Jorge Polanco had been injured a couple of times, but had shown no signs of slowing down. None. There had been nothing in his track record that suggested he was trending in the wrong direction. You looked at, for example, he had started his strikeout rate, which he's striking out 31% of the time this year. He had struck out at a higher rate last year, but we're talking a guy with a career sub 20% strikeout rate. And even if you saw the increase in strikeout rate, well, he played half a year last year. So you could say, okay, so his timing was off because he only played half a season and it was hard for him to get back in a rhythm. Okay. Well, before he's been hurt here recently, he's played almost every single day for the Mariners, and that hasn't mattered. It has not mattered, and he has continued to swing and miss at just an insane rate. Let's dive into it. Let's dive into the real meat of this issue for Jorge Polanco. We've highlighted this before, but now, we're going to paint as clear of a picture as possible of what's going wrong with Jorge Polanco. It's the fastball. It is the fastball. He is about league average against breaking balls and against off-speed pitches. But against heaters, he's bad. He is atrocious. This is a man in his career has been plus 21 in the time that Baseball Savant has tracked run value since 2017. He's been plus 21 against fastballs overall, and that includes Lyle. In 2017, he was negative 10 against fastballs. So including that negative 10, since that mark, he's plus 21 against fastballs. A good fastball hitter every season of his career. This year in a small sample, he's already negative 6. Already negative 6. And I'll throw it back to you with this number. He has a strikeout rate against fastballs of 35%. 35% against straight line heaters. You know what the number was last year? 14.7%. And that's where we come back to what happened. A 20% jump in strikeout rate against the same pitch year to year. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any sense. And for those who aren't as familiar with run value and you just want to look at the slug numbers against the pitch, look at the difference here, people. Jorge Polanco last year slugged .620 against four-seam fastballs. In other words, he destroyed heaters. Destroyed them. That's what the Mariners expected him to do coming to Seattle. He is slugging .208 against four-seam fastballs this year. His expected slug, if maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, this could turn around, because sometimes expected numbers say you're getting unlucky. His expected slugging against four-seam fastballs is .230. It's May 30th. What is going on? Legitimately, what is going on? I don't know if the second base position is just cursed for the Mariners, but this doesn't make any sense because of all the guys they brought in over the last few years. This is the most sustainable profile that's come into town. This is the best hitter of all the second basemen that's come into town since Robbie. I don't get it. And he's only 30. You just mentioned it. Kolten Wong was a little older when he got here last year. And even though we expected him to be about a 2-win player, I'm less surprised to see Polanco. Sorry, I'm less surprised to see Wong do what he did last year than what's happening to Polanco, because Wong was older and he didn't have the power profile that Polanco has. And Polanco also doesn't strike out. How in one offseason do you go from slugging .620 against four-seam fastballs to nearly under 200?
And if you're wondering if 2023 was an outlier year against fastballs for Polanco, no, he slugged over 600 against fastballs in 22, and he slugged over 600 against fastballs in 21. Not an outlier. This is the outlier season. And if you want the Kolten Wong comparison, it lines up too perfectly. It literally does. Like, as this is going to pain people, Kolten Wong in 2021 and 2022 slugged .520 against fastballs, and then he comes to Seattle in 2023 and slugs .297 against fastballs. Like, what? Here's the only justification I can have for this. Here's the only justification. So you and I have talked about how down of an offensive year this is league-wide in baseball. Yeah, it is a terrible offensive year for hitters. The league-wide BABIP is 288 now. The league-wide OPS is under 700. Like, it is, like, hitters are down bad offensively. So like, if you were to go ahead. Just to give your statement there some more context, I know we'll get to Luke Raley in much more detail later. Luke Raley has a 102 WRC plus for the year. His OPS is 692. His OPS is 692, and by league standards, he's an above average hitter right now. That's how down offense is in baseball this year. The only explanation I have for all of this is that some of these hitters we'll talk about come to Seattle in already the most difficult hitters park in baseball, in the worst hitters year we've seen in a long time. Like, the combination of coming to a completely new place, a new culture, a new environment, like a new drive to work, like a new weather outside, a new routine, on top of the fact you come to this ballpark that is, whenever you hit the ball in the air, it dies. And it changes your mindset of everything. And then on top of that, pitchers are throwing harder than ever. The breaking stuff is better than ever. And the overall league-wide offensive environment is as bad as it's ever been. So if you cook that all into a perfect soup, perhaps that's what you have with Jorge Polanco. Because that's really the only explanation I have for a 30-year-old former All-Star to fall off a cliff like this, is just against that pitch too, against a four-seam fastball. It doesn't work. Here's a context number. If you want the tiniest little bit of optimism, and I want to give Shannon Dreher a shout out. She brought this number up when she was on Brock and Salk on Wednesday, talking about this very issue with new hitters struggling. Do you remember Marcus Semion's first year in Texas, Lyle?
Oh, that first half of the year was tough for him. Really tough with the bat.
At the same point, right now, where he is, where we are right now on recording here on May 30th, Marcus Semien had a 53 WRC plus at that point. Jorge Polanco's actually blowing that number out of the water right now. He's at 79. Mm-hmm. If you want some context. So it's not all, like, potentially not all hope is lost, really, because it has been proven when Marcus Semien then eventually turns it around. He's great in the second half of 22, and then he's a key piece of the Rangers winning the World Series last year. So it is possible. Similar ages, too, by the way. It is possible for this thing to get turned around. It is possible. But right now, I think, Lyle, you and I unanimously agree we don't have any answers for this. Like, we really don't. There is no other way to paint Jorge Polanco's first 2 months as a Mariner as anything other than a failure.
Again, like my best answer to this is the position cursed? I legit have no idea, because why is a guy like this with this profile not thriving here? And you can use the T-Mobile Park factor all you want. He played in Minnesota. Minnesota's not an easy park to hit in. That weather's not friendly early in the year. Maybe it's harder slightly to hit in Seattle, but it's not apples and oranges. It's not two totally different environments. It's hard to hit home runs in both places. So, yes, it's a different drive to work. Yes, it's a new routine, a new organization. He's never been in a new organization. And the human side of things is something that people probably don't always take into account enough. And the adjustment to a totally new lifestyle may play a factor. But when you see how he's hitting and the drastic fall off like this, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. All his power profile numbers are down. You look at his Savant page from last year, all his power numbers were good. Here's where he was at. He was in the 82nd percentile in X slug. He was in the 88th percentile in barrel rate. So he was barreling up the ball. He was hitting it hard. Here we are in 24. He's in the 6th percentile in X slug. He's in the 28th percentile in barrel rate. I can't stress it enough. And I hate saying this because genuinely he's really awesome. Like just in terms of talking to the guy and chatting it up with him a little bit, really, really good dude. But just in terms of his play on the field, I cannot for the life of me figure out what's going on with him.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with his quality of contact too. We're talking about profiles dropping from the 75th or above percentile to, quality of contact, it's 76th to 13th. It does not happen.
The craziest one's the X slug. That's the biggest drastic difference. Again, 82nd percentile to 6th percentile at 30 years old. How does that even happen?
I don't know. I don't know. If you and I knew, we'd probably not be podcasting. We'd be making a lot more money.
Right.
I would say.
And here's one other thing about Polanco, too. Again, I know we got to move on to other guys, but I did want to throw this stat out there. The one saving grace for him so far has been the fact that he's continued to walk, even though he's striking out way more. But even that's a little bit skewed. Look at this. So as a whole, he's walking a little under 12% of the time. I had optimism, despite a slow start in April, that things would get turned around for Polanco because he was hitting for such a low average in the month of April. He was hitting 170. His on base was 314, and he wasn't slugging. I said, okay, weather's going to warm up. Power's going to come. At least he's getting on base. Things should turn around. Well, his average went up. He hit 237 in May. He didn't slug enough in May, but it still went up from April. It was at 322. His on base percentage went down from April to May. And he walked in the month of May. I cannot even believe this. He ran out for the month of May a 1.7% walk rate. He was walking almost 17% of the time in April. It's gone down to under 2% for the month. I don't know how that happens either.
Man. And unfortunately for Polanco, he's offering no value elsewhere. Any other facet.
Right. He's just not a great defender.
No, not a great defender. We didn't expect him to be a good defender. The point was his bat was supposed to make up for the fact he was not a good defender. And in past years, he's been a good base runner. As you get older, you're not expected to be a good base runner, but he still has 73rd percentile sprint speed, and yet he's below average. Right. He hasn't provided any base running run value. It's sitting at 0 right now for him. Mm-hmm. So what we ask of guys, even if you're struggling, make it up somewhere else. That's what Julio's done in center field all season. It's not happening with Polanco.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
Hopefully he has the Semien effect and turns it around, because they could really, really use it. I'm going to continue to say it throughout this show. If all these guys that they brought in were 100 WRC plus hitters right now, the Mariners might have an 8 or 9 game lead in the American League West. It's the fact that everybody is so significantly below where they're not just expected to be, but below league average. So let's move on to the second guy here. We spent a lot of time on Polanco. I think it's warranted because he is the most head-scratching, puzzling factor of everybody for why this is happening. I know everybody has the questions that we have, so we dove in on him a good bit.